So the impact construction is really more of the other things. So we can sell at the same price, but cut the time frame down by 80%, which obviously there's a ton of savings there. We can take there's no waste, so we can compress the cost there. The quality, you don't have lawsuits because the building has tweaks and twists and everything else.
Damion, welcome show day. What's going on?
Michael, it is good to be back. I got a feeling this is going to keep people on their toes. The only one that's going to fall asleep and nod off is Joe Biden if he's watching.
Oh man, mic drop on that one. I heard, and I remember this. You told me earlier that you grew up in Alaska, actually, and I don't really know the full story, but you're big on mindset, and you've gone through some stuff, and maybe we'll get to this in the show here about mindset and overcoming adversity and that kind of stuff. So, talk to us about how do those formative years kind of shape you and make you more of a resilient person that you are right now.
Yeah, I look back and I think the hearing no, like we're all used to, we've heard this as kids or parents or somebody's telling us no in the school system or somebody. But I remember as a kid when I was 10, 11 years old, I got told no all the time. Like, no, we can't afford this. No, there's no money. And it's the same message. Like, no, I guess I don't make enough money. And no, there's not enough resources, or I'm not smart enough. And I remember back then, my parents told me no, and it made me mad. And instead of saying, okay, I accept defeat, I said, I'm going to figure this out. And I wanted to buy some Nintendo games. I wanted to play video games. And they didn't want to pay for them. So I started a business buying Nintendo games by the batch, by like 20 of them at a time, so I could play them and then sell them. So it was a wholesale retail thing. And it was the beginning of saying, I don't have to take no. Really irritated my parents in my teenage years, a lot of therapy involved, but it was the start of saying, I don't really care if somebody tells me no. I'm just going to find a way to figure it out and fix it and do the thing I want to do. And I think that that's relevant for everybody.
How'd you come up with the money to buy these things?
I probably did some other side hustle. I went out and like the modern day side hustle of driving an Uber, where you make an extra few $100 and then that turns into a down payment for a rental house. And then you do your thing. I was out there 10, 11 years old selling Christmas wrapping paper or mowing lawns, or I was doing anything and everything. It was the hustle and grind. It's the opposite of the 4-hour work week. I was doing the 180-hour work week out of 168. Like I was just always out there trying to find the startup capital by creating it.
But you got your video games.
I got the video games, and then what's interesting is that led to a whole lot of video games and this whole big business around Nintendo games, and ultimately that allowed me, from that time forward, I saved up money, and that's how I bought my first car. Was that?
What'd you buy?
A Ford Tempo, 1986. I had to dig it out of a snow pile in the middle of December in Alaska. It was like under 6 feet of snow, and I was proud of that. I see a lot of people that are given things or expecting things, whether it's from their parents or the government. And my parents are like, no, you can't have a car. No, a car's expensive. And I said, you watch me, I'm going to go do it. So I unburied that car and I drove it away. And then I crashed it a week later.
So interesting. So I can't figure out whether you had a good relationship with your parents or not. In other words, did they actually encourage and support you, or they kind of like try to kill you and you overcame it somehow?
Well, it's funny because I got dual messages, which is like what people deal with. They're dealing with, hey, you can do anything. And then, no, you can't do anything. Sit there, be quiet, shut up. And so it was kind of like that with my dad told me everything. He was scared of everything. And he tried real hard, but he was like, no, this is too much money. And then my mom's like, you can do anything. If you want to be a rock and roll star, you can do that. And I was like, Mom, have you heard me sing? Like, that's a disaster. That is not, probably like that one dude that was on American Idol that was terrible. And he ended up getting a contract and a record, but I was getting dual messages. So I didn't really take my mom too seriously, but something in me said, I don't really care if you tell me I can't do it. In fact, if you do, that's going to give me more energy to go prove you're wrong.
Interesting. That's interesting. So clearly you were very resourceful from an early age as well. And you also were very successful financially early on, but it didn't turn out so well. Talk about that.
It's funny because I did the grind. I remember I started off when I was up in Alaska, and I was vacuuming the one of the BP building. I was doing that during the day, and at night I was vacuuming the building, and during the day I was knocking door to door selling Kirby vacuums. And so like there's always this grind. I sold 0 vacuums, but I did vacuum the hell out of that floor. And so that was one of those things where I thought this is probably not a long-term plan. And so ultimately I got kicked out of college. When I started a bookstore on campus that put the other bookstore out of business, they said, you have to leave because we want to keep our pencil machine out there that's selling all the pencils, papers, and overpriced books. And then when I started an insurance agency, And I got really bored with it because it wasn't a big enough deal. I read Donald Trump's book in the late 90s, or one of his books, Art of the Comeback and Art of the Deal. And I said, I'm going to be that guy. Now, this is pre-President Trump. So I ended up going into real estate, and I was buying houses using my credit card, which is a really great idea. That's a joke. Don't do that. That's a really bad idea. And then ultimately, that because I listened to guys like you when I was starting up, I was out there going to seminars, and I just did what the people told me. And I was like, I don't know what I don't know, so I'll just listen to them and follow what they said. And that led to making a ton of money, made millions of dollars, was very, I would say, pretty rich, but I wasn't really wealthy, because I was rich with money, but not wealthy with wisdom. And that led to 2007, thinking I was 10 feet tall and bulletproof, and had all my projects simultaneously fail in 2008. So I went from a $20 million portfolio to negative 5 million in 12 months, and ended up being homeless. And it was a reset, if you will. There's this great reset that's happening globally. I had a great reset in my own life in 2008.
How low did you have to go to come out of that?
I mean, it's, if you've ever done limbo, I was below the floor. So being negative 5 million, you're so far down. And what you have to, there's this like whole psychology of going through a mess. And in the beginning, the first thing you do is you deny it's real. Like, oh, no, it's fine. I was just borrowing more money until I ran out of resources, and then I pretended I hadn't lost everything, and everything just kind of going along. And there was a phase of that for probably a year, and then finally I said, you know what, I did this. And the big shift around that, and this is for a lot of people out there that have lost money or done something, made mistakes, which is part of this whole process of investing in business. It's really acknowledging that you are in charge and you're in control, and just owning it. The low point was when I was being the biggest victim, which is being the biggest douche nozzle ever. Like, oh, it's woe to me. And when I said, you know what, that was actually me. I made those choices. I got involved in this stuff, and owning that stuff. There's this incredible liberation and this freedom. I mean, you got it on your shirt, freedom. That the freedom is in owning your life. And once that happened, it took a couple of years of therapy. I mean, it was intense. It was very painful, but it was the work that had to be done. And once I'd gone through that, it gave me a platform of truth to be able to go out and ask a better question. Like, what am I doing? Is this just for money, or is it really for freedom? Is it just my freedom, or is it other people's freedom? And when I shifted to figuring out ways and focusing on other people's freedom first, then all of a sudden I got unbelievable side effects of freedom and money. So I had to shift from my own hedonistic tendencies to serving other people. And just like you do with all your students, it's really, that's the big shift that creates all of the freedom.
I wouldn't say I had hedonistic tendencies, but I had to come up to the to the same realization. I would say when I read Rich Dad Poor Dad in 2004, and I plowed all my money into restaurants, it was about freedom, but it was really more about money. Yeah. Frankly, it was like my financial retirement plan, and of course, that did not materialize. I ended up losing everything from that, and it didn't change until I was really at the low point. And I did shift from, oh, woe me, to what am I supposed to learn out of this? And one of the things was, hey, man, it's not about you. It kind of like you learn when you have a kid, you're like, oh, gosh, it's no longer about you. But I had to learn that about money and just about maybe being on earth. It's really not about you. So, hey, this was nice. Money is just really hollow. Why don't you figure out something a little greater that might actually help somebody? And that plan was to start blogging around all the shenanigans I did. And one of the things that I did. I flipped houses, got a pizza, did it. And then the apartment buildings, that's the one thing that worked. And I was like, man, I'm supposed to blog about this thing. The problem was the business plan was awful. It was helping a lot of people, but it wasn't directly helping me. And then all of a sudden, it started to help me. But that, looking at my spreadsheet, there's no way that could materialize in that helping me. And so how did you, for your own experience, there's a lot of lessons you could learn from that. A lot of people learned the lesson, real estate bad, right? They're like, people lost a house in foreclosure or short sale, something like that. Oh, real estate bad. Now, you could have learned that lesson, but why did you get back into it? What allowed you to come out, kind of shake it off, and then get back into it?
Well, when I got to the point where I realized that I had to figure out what I was actually here for. Like, you're just talking about these things what you're just referring to. I had to ask the question and get the answer. Like, what am I actually doing? And what I realized is I'm meant to be serving by teaching using experience, not just reading a book and teaching the book, but literally going out there and sharing wisdom, which is very different. A lot of people that teach in schools, they don't have any wisdom. They have a lot of educational facts and figures, and they just kind of push those out, but they don't really understand the deep emotional experience. So once I got that, the next step was to say, okay, I need to narrow my focus, just like you're talking about pizza and restaurants and real estate and flipping and all these things. What I see most people, including me, do is we chase all these things and we bounce off the surface. We don't make any headway because we're not going deep into anything. So back in 2012, I started shifting my focus, and it took me about 4 years to get really narrow. And the narrow was going into the space of giving people control of their retirement accounts with the EQRP. When I cut everything else out, then all of a sudden I started getting traction, and that started growing. Now, I think the universe and God tested me, because it took me a couple of years of doing that, where I ran out of money and I had to grind going into debt again. So I've lost everything 4 times. That was the 4th time where I was negative, and I said, I'm not quitting. There are people that are counting on me, and I really believe in that. And so I kept going with that. And we talk about like the spreadsheets and these terrible ideas. A lot of times they're not terrible ideas. They just require lag. You got to give it enough time for the garden to grow. And so I had to give this thing enough time. It wasn't a get rich quick scheme like most businesses are not, whether it's pizza or real estate. And so that focus into that space allowed me to start connecting with a lot of really cool people and serving them. That's how we got connected, was, you setting up your EQRP and sharing this with the community, giving all these people a chance to not only have a tool, but these communities that you and I've created, where people are working together and they get better together and they're getting freer together. And so it was really narrowing the thing. Like, it doesn't matter what you do. You can sell pencils, you can invest in multifamily, doing something, getting really great at it, becoming masterful at it. That's one of these keys that you just can't overlook and you can't skip.
Yeah, I call that shiny objectitis. I definitely had it as well, right? Especially early on, you read Rich Dad Poor Dad, and he uses confusing terms like real estate investing and cash flow businesses. And so I'm chasing like the shiny objects. And there's a problem, like you said, with focusing down and shiny objectitis, because with shiny objectitis, you're constantly shifting. You're not giving any success. Sometimes though, like I did with house flipping, which I did for 3 years, I didn't realize how insane it was until 3 years went by. And I should have caught myself months into it going, hey, wait a minute, what am I doing here? This is not passive income that I'm doing. Like I never took the time to think about it. I said, I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to flip houses. And I think there's danger in both of those things. I think you have to be intentional about something, but then you got to stick with it. Things always take longer than I think they should, And like today, it would have been a shame had you quit on your EQRP, which really is a much better version of the self-directed IRA, right? So, but you could have, and maybe even should have quit. I'm sure maybe you had advisors who said, man, stop putting money into this thing. It's a sinking ship. Get out.
Everyone said that, Michael. Every single person around me that was my team, my advisors, they all quit, and they said, you should quit. And so it's an interesting crossroads, because sometimes you should listen to people because you just don't know what you don't know. And sometimes you need to listen to your instincts. The problem when you're brand new is you don't have any instincts because you don't have any wisdom or experience. And so like after the last 25 years, I've started more than 70 companies. There's a lot of lessons there because I've screwed up unbelievable amounts of things, lost a lot of money and gone through this process. After EQRP got its own legs and has people running it, and there's this incredible energy around that, it's now in a mature state where it's got a 15-person team, and that's fantastic. What happens though is that I'm building this manufacturing company, Frametech, and it looks like this amazing thing that's gone from zero. It was a napkin 2 years ago, and our valuation a few weeks ago came in at $463 million. That looks like an overnight success story, but it's not. It took 25 freaking years to do it and 70 companies. And that's the part that people miss when they see these giant success stories. They don't realize how much time and energy. It always takes longer, and it always costs more, just like you just said.
Now, I always look back in the rear mirror and say, what could I have done differently, right? I'm going to ask you the same thing, right? Because for example, when I got into restaurants, my biggest mistake, I didn't have like an advisor, like someone who's, done what I want to do. I was like, I have money. I'm going to hire this guy and I'm going to sit back and count the passive income. I lost my shirt instead. Now I had a mentor and I started flipping houses. And then with my first, postcard campaign, I got 2 houses out of it. Right. And then with apartments again, I didn't have a mentor either. And it was I should have never bought that building in Washington, D.C. So looking back on myself, one of my biggest mistakes was that I kind of went on it a little bit on my own. Now, I understand that you got to you can't learn everything, and you can't borrow from everyone's experience. There's certain things you have to learn from yourself, but sometimes, maybe I'm a glutton for punishment, and maybe so are you. What could you have done differently? Imagine you and I being where we are today 10 years earlier in life. Like, was all the pain necessary? Or could you have a little less pain and with a little more outcome? Just saying.
I think one of the things that I would have done differently is like if I was to go back in time, if I'm telling anybody now or I'm telling myself this 25 years ago, understand that these things that you do wrong, if you will, or the mistakes are not going to kill you. They're not going to eat you. And I would have probably made faster mistakes faster. So maybe I would have compressed 25 years into 10 or 15. And that would have been awesome. But I don't know that you can get to a place where you have the financial and wealth thermostat where you can actually be doing things like working within $1 billion portfolio like we are now. That doesn't happen on your first deal. It takes a long time to level up. Like you can start off doing houses, but if you said, okay, I've done no real estate, I'm going to start off doing $100 million apartment by myself, you're psychotic. Could you do that after a certain number of years and experience? Absolutely. So I would have told myself to fail faster, sooner, more often. And that's the biggest mistake of the mistakes, is not doing more of the mistakes more frequently earlier, because I was like, ooh, people are going to judge me. Ooh, I'm going to lose my money. I've lost my money 4 times and I'm still here. I didn't die. And what's crazy is I've seen people, my friends from growing up, and I'm not even 50 yet, and I've seen people that have died. So I'm like, wait, if I'm not dead, then I'm here for a reason still. And it's to be going through something and learning from it, not to be sitting idle waiting for life to happen. And I think that that's what most people are waiting. They're waiting for something to happen. They're waiting for whoever they think is going to save them in the presidential election. They're waiting for something. And what the key is, the trick is taking some type of some step, some action, something. And the hack is being around people like you have with your masterminds, where people are around other people that are doing things and they're led by people that have done it. And that speeds up this process. But you can't hack your way and not make the mistakes or not do the action. Like wealth doesn't just show up because you will it and it falls from the sky. That's one of the biggest misnomers that's out there with the law of attraction. It's not true. You got a law of action. Like you got to go take action.
I think that's the key. And it frustrates me when people tell me they want to be financial free with real estate and I show them the exact step-by-step way to get there and they don't take action. I find it's because they have difficulty dealing with uncertainty. I was going to say managing risk, but it's really more fundamental than that. It's dealing with uncertainty and how do we as entrepreneurs overcome that, right? Because there is no certainty. In my mind, there's probabilities. Like I work in probabilities all the time. Like what's the probability of me succeeding and failing? Probabilities, but I can never, very rarely can I have certainty in something. Like I have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, with not knowing everything. I don't know, that's kind of what I think maybe holds people back, is they have this difficulty in dealing with uncertainty. What has that been for you?
Well, I think here's the reality around certainty. You can either burn your bridges and go like you're a crazy person to be obsessed. Like I love Grant Cardone's book, Be Obsessed or Be Average, because I think everybody needs to find the thing that they're obsessed about and just go for it. At the same time, when you're talking about the odds and statistics, people say, oh, 9 out of 10 businesses are going to fail, and they have all these statistics. So part of the process is, okay, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to be willing to start a bunch of things, and I need a bigger sample size. Like if you have one thing and it's your first thing and you're like, this is it, I'm going to make this work no matter what, and you have no experience. I'll give you a good example. There's a company that attempted to do what we're doing with Frametech a few years ago. They spent like $2 billion on building this thing. They had a bunch of Google guys with a bunch of Google money. So you can imagine it's like hundreds of millions of dollars from these guys. And they went out there. They didn't have the experience of being in the industry. So they did this whole thing and they didn't have any idea how you actually did it with, like, you need to move big components on the back of trucks. They didn't have the actual experience like we have in real estate. So they didn't know what they didn't know. And all the money in the world, they just blew it up. And so I think you have to go through the process to where you have this innate understanding and you have a team around you, and then realize that if you give it enough time and you have enough sample size, that certainty is a certainty. But if you say, well, it's just, I have no experience and I'm starting out and this is going to happen, then that's delusional. Like if you just think that that's how it works, here's the hack though. Borrowing other people's certainty because they've been through it. If somebody goes to you and says, I want to invest in multifamily, and you're like, okay, here's the process, I'm going to lead you down this path, and they follow along, kind of like my mentors did back 25 years ago. If they're following along, they're literally using all of your certainty from all of your experience. And that's the hack. But if you say, well, I'm just going to read a book and then I'm going to do it and like everything's going to be fine, that's psychotic.
Well, it seems to be a little bit what you did with Frametech. I don't want to ask you about Frametech, but it seems like you partnered with a very experienced operator, the CEO of Frametech. I'm like, what does Damion know about the construction, manufacturing, and robotics? I'm like, what is he doing now? Right? I watched your video on Frametech, and I was like, I know the answer, because Damion's a smart guy. He's built teams. He's aligned himself with a very experienced operator. And talk a little bit about Frametech and your approach. And I think the biggest thing is how you got into Frametech. Of course, overnight success.
Right. And that's what it is. And everybody goes, oh man, I need one of those overnight success deals. So like a few years ago, it's really funny. A friend of mine brought this deal. He flew to Dallas. I think it was actually at your event. He flew to Dallas, handed me this pack of papers, and he said, I want you to look at this. And I said, thanks a lot. I'm really busy. And so I didn't really look at it for 6 months. And when I did look at it, I said, there's no way this deal is too good to be true. There's something wrong here. And so after maybe a month or two, my partner David and I flew out to Arizona and met with these people. We said, okay, we're curious. And that's what you should do. You should be curious and skeptical. As an investor, that's your job. Curiosity and skepticism are a good balance. So we went out and we sat down with these guys, and we said, we really like to hear who you guys are, because the deal looked awesome, but anybody can make a pro forma look awesome. You've seen this a million times with apartments. They look awesome, and then they blow up because nobody manages them well, or there's all sorts of warts. And so we talked to these guys, and it turned out these guys that were sitting around this table at lunch had been in this space for 50 years. They'd been doing this. They had deep understanding. Like there was a level of genius because of their execution intelligence that I'd never seen before. So I didn't have to go into this space. I knew enough about business in general. I knew enough about real estate. I knew that there was a huge problem. The problem was simple. We have a shortage of housing in America, like millions of units. And these guys are like, look, we have this idea, but we're missing $40 million. That's how much it's going to take to make this thing come to life. And I said, well, I like you guys. First off, I liked them. I felt like I could trust them. Their integrity was obvious. They were solid, and they knew what the heck they were doing. They just needed fuel. And so that's how Frametech came to life. It was us saying, all right, we're going to fuel this. So over lunch, we committed $40 million, which is crazy, by the way, because I didn't have $40 million in my checking account waiting to fund a deal. And David and I brought this back to our community, and we said, we have this incredible opportunity. We're going to put our skin in the game. We're going to go all in. We're going to build this thing with these guys. And our community came together, and just over a year, we put together $40 million. And that was the first plant that's coming online this summer. And the second one is coming online in a couple of years. And it was literally taking this leap of faith with people that knew what they were doing. And now there's 400 investors, and we're going to create 600 to 700 core one jobs. Like, it's a really cool thing, but it started with a bit of a leap of faith and having the team. To your point about teams, that's what it's all about. People that know how to execute. If you don't have that, I don't care how good the deal is.
And the operator is critical. And I draw parallels in the multifamily space as well. But you did bring your strength to the table, and that was you had raised capital before. You hadn't raised $40 million before,
no,
but you had raised capital before. You have a platform. You're very good on social media, and you already had that. You just didn't raise that much before, but that was your strength. And I think he recognized the fact that you actually have access to capital. Was it a stretch? Yeah, probably. And so same in the multifamily space, right? It's like, this is why these joint ventures work so well. You have a very strong operator. Maybe they've got access to off-market deals, or they have asset management or whatever else, and then they're just missing the capital. And this is why these joint ventures work so well together. And I think this allowed you to get into this space, because it is solving a real problem. Talk briefly about how Frametech is solving the problem, because I have seen some people try to solve the problem, but it's not really solving the problem. There's always something with it. It's either scale, or it's really not reducing costs very much. Like, how is Frametech a little different? Why do you think that you could actually make a dent?
So I know it for a fact that we make a dent because we're producing product. What's happened in construction, especially with framing and components, is there's a lot of mergers and acquisition. One company buys another company, they change the labels on trucks and equipment, and then boom, that's it. There's no real growth in this space. And so what these guys had this vision for was to create almost a fully automated process to build all of the pieces for the bones of houses and apartments. So Frametech is a vertically integrated framing company. Basically what we do is somebody gives us a plan for a house or an apartment, and we build in our plant, almost fully automated, the entire bone structure, all the floors, the walls, the trusses. And we do this using a patented technology of finger joining boards. What does that mean? It means that we take our boards and we stick them together we basically put teeth in each end and we glue them together. So we have one continuous board. And instead of taking a 14-foot board, cutting off 2 feet, using it for a 12-foot stud, we end up having almost no waste. So imagine this, everything that we're building, we have like 99% less waste, which means we're not throwing away all sorts of dumpsters full of trees, which saves a ton of money. And then the process of doing this in a manufacturing facility, we take your house, for example, that normally takes a couple months to frame. We're going to do the entire process of you giving it to us, and then we build it and we bring it out, and our team puts it together on site. That's a 2-week process. For an apartment that's like 100 units, that's a 10-month process. We do it in 2 months. So what we're doing is we're giving a better quality product because it's inside of a manufacturing facility, and so our tolerances are super tight. We're doing a better quality product. We're doing it way faster. We have almost no waste. So it's 4 times faster. The quality is 10 times better, and the waste is 99% less. And so this helps to actually solve the problem. And when I love when people go, well, what about competition? I'm like, well, one, if somebody comes along and they said, okay, we have the exact same mindset, we've been doing this 50 years, and they built one, there are 4 to 7 million or more missing units. So we could use all the solutions. We could use tiny houses and 3D houses. Frametech is part of the solution. And what we're doing is we're creating a model that can be spread out amongst our next location that we're building out is in Texas after Arizona. So we'll end up having 15 or so plants out there. And we're building this whole process to help solve the problem, starting with a very basic concept everybody can get their arms around, which is the framing in houses and apartments.
So what does it cost then per compared to how things are done today? Give me an idea. Is it half? Is it 70%? Like what's the impact to construction?
So the impact to construction is really more of the other things. So we can sell at the same price, but cut the time frame down by 80%, which obviously there's a ton of savings there. We can take there's no waste, so we can compress the cost there. The quality, you don't have lawsuits because the building has tweaks and twists and everything else. And then all of the other subs that are involved, the electricians, the plumbers, they get to come in and they see, oh, look, all of our lines are snapped on here. All the holes are drilled, like all these things. So you start seeing all of the cost savings throughout the entire process. So ultimately, even if our cost for framing is the same, because you have a way higher quality product, the savings end up rippling through the process. And the time frame, when you do something 4 times faster, the cost of capital. Like when you're sitting on something and paying interest and it's taken all that time, and then you can't sell the thing, so you can't move to the next project. So ultimately, if we wanted to, we could cut costs. What we're doing is we're allowing a better quality product faster, which ultimately saves a ton of money in the whole process for the builder and for the ultimate customer.
That's pretty cool. What's your vision? Where do you think this could go?
It's going to spread across America. I see 50 to 100 of these plants between Arizona, mostly through the Sun Belt. And I think that they're likely to be, we've had a ton of communities around the country up north and really all over the place coming to us and saying, when can you build this here? We have developers in Houston. We have people in Florida and the Carolinas. So this is going to be the new standard for framing in America. And ultimately for manufacturing and construction, because of what we're doing, the culture we're building, and doing something that's, our plant is almost entirely solar. So we have almost no carbon footprint. It's almost, there's so many cool things about it that we're doing that I think other manufacturers and other people that are trying to solve problems in business are going to say, the Frametech way and their standard is what we're going to use. So we're hopeful this spreads way beyond just construction, way beyond manufacturing into business and ripples through society in a really positive way, which is, I think we could use a lot more of that versus all the negativity and division that's out there.
So you talked a lot about focus, but is this going to take up your time for the foreseeable future, or you got some other irons in the fire?
No, it's really funny because people they'll come out and they're like, hey, I got this thing. And I'm like, good. Go get your thing. I'm like, I don't have any interest in your thing. And it's not because it's not a bad thing. It's because I am laser focused on this one thing. And it's like what we talked about in the beginning of this, where once you find that thing or pick it, it doesn't matter what the thing is. You can make $1 billion and create a ripple effect in the world with pencils. Like there's anything that you pick, but you got to go all in at some point. And so when I decided to do this thing and go all in, one thing happens. Once there's commitment, there's providence, and all sorts of amazing things unfold, and the resources start to pile in, and people get excited because they know that you're focused. They know that you're going to be a good steward of their money. and their future. And so that's what we've seen. If I said I've got 50 different things going on, people are like, all right, well, I'm not as excited. When I say this is the only thing that I'm doing and I don't plan on doing anything else, people are like, got it. You're very serious. I moved in, Michael, a half an hour from the plant. I moved back to Arizona to be basically camped out at the plant to make sure this works. Like, I am married. I'm 10 months pregnant with this thing, and this is my baby, and I'm taking it all the way, and we are going to change the face of manufacturing and construction in America.
Focus. I love it. Hey, Damion, how can people connect with you?
Best place to reach me is really to see what I'm all about, is to go to Frametech, frametech.com, and visit and see. I mean, that's what you'll see me talking about on LinkedIn and Twitter, and reach out and check it out. And truly, this is an invitation to everybody watching and listening. Come to Arizona. It's beautiful, by the way. Come out and see this. Like, we'd love to show you, walk you through, and give you some inspiration for whatever you're doing. I just think it's really cool to be able to do that. So you want to connect with me? Check out the website and come to Arizona and see what we got. I'd love to give you a personal tour right here in the central Arizona, right outside of Sedona.
I'm sure a number of people are going to take you up on that, Damion. It's been awesome to jam with you as always, man.
It's good to see you. It was really great to catch up.